Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. My name's Pete Morrow. I'm one of the co-organizers of Lean LA. I hope I don't piss anyone off, but we're going to need to break some of those rules. Please turn your phones back on. Feel free to tweet during this whole event. Our hashtag will be #LeanLA. Our Twitter account is LeanLA. I'm going to be taking some flash photography. Sorry. So I'm going to make this quick because you guys didn't come here to listen to me. So Fireside Chat with Ries. As you know, you're lucky to be here because there's evidently an aftermarket for tickets going on right now at our meetup site. I think someone raffled one off on Twitter. So just a little background for people here who are new to Lean LA. We're a nonprofit group. We're about 2 years old. We're organized by myself and Joe Zulli and Patrick Vlaskovitz. Unfortunately, Patrick is absent tonight, which is really a shame. He was really instrumental in helping put this together, and this is a big event for us. So I'm going to channel him for a minute. And first of all, you guys know Patrick. I can't even see it. This is weird having a dark audience. I usually ask questions and ask people to raise hands. Anyways, if you've been to one of our events before, Patrick's the big guy. So it's like me plus Joe equals Patrick physically and probably also mentally as well. But anyways, I will channel him now and say, please, you better ask some good questions tonight. So think about what you're going to ask. A little bit about Lean LA. We hold Lean Startup and Customer Development meetups about once a month in Los Angeles. We have great talks. In the past, we've had Steve Blank. We've hosted Eric Ries before, Hiten Shah, Dan Martell. You can sign up at leanla.com. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, savings.com and Coloft. Yeah, go ahead, clap. All right, so that's it for me. I'm going to introduce you to Tim Growling from UCLA.
Thank you. I wanted to welcome you all to UCLA. I'm Tim Growling, chair of the Communication Studies Department here and one of the co-founders of Startup UCLA. We're very excited, and the fire marshal is very excited by this huge attendance tonight. We want to thank the people who braved West Side traffic to get here, and also the students who braved final exams, which are going on this week, to come here tonight. We appreciate your dedication to your studies. I also wanted to especially thank Dean Alessandro Duranti, who helped provide the funding for all that food you saw out there, and actually the venue. Lean LA provided for the food as well. And the alumni, the staff, and the volunteers who helped make this event possible. I wanted to also tell you that some of those same people have helped us found Startup UCLA this year. It is a new organization founded in part by discussions with our alumni about how we might be able to help UCLA participate more fully in the entrepreneurial wave that is currently taking place in Los Angeles in the startup area. We're trying to help our students with a variety of activities, including a new summer accelerator that one of my colleagues, Robert Jadon, who is the new program director, will tell you about. Robert is an entrepreneur and early-stage investor based in Los Angeles. His previous company, Micromemory, was a leader in storage networking and DSP markets that was acquired by Curtis Wright. In addition to being a proud Bruin alumni, Robert is now a manager of the Dauntless Fund, a member of Tech Coast Angels, and an investor advisor to the Amplify LA Accelerator. So, Robert?
Okay. All right, it's great to see everyone out here, or I can barely see you, but I know you're out there. It's sort of worlds colliding for me. I was part of Lean LA's group, and I'm also a proud Bruin alumni, and I'm really excited to be heading up this summer accelerator program. We're actually modeling it a little bit after all the accelerators that you've seen around here in LA. We're going to be hosting 4 to 5 companies on campus this summer, providing them with seed funding, mentorship, space on campus, as well as accounting, legal services, and the other benefits of working in an accelerator. And then, of course, positioning them on a demo day with the other accelerators, downstream, and early stage investors. So there's a couple of guidelines with the companies themselves. The first, of course, is that we need to have at least one technical member on the team. And the second one is that at least half the team must be UCLA students. So we're actually open to teams having a mix of students and non-students. And so make sure you go to startupucla.com to get more details about that. And I'll be sticking around afterwards, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. couple other things I wanted to let you know about are that we have a few upcoming events here, and we're going to be building those for the next couple of months, and then after the summer as well. The first one coming up is on April 10th, and it's with Julia Lamb. She's a UCLA alumni who was working at Facebook, and she was also involved with the Facebook Fund, so she's going to be talking about startup skills. We also have UCLA's version of Startup Weekend on April 13th to the 15th. So for those of you in the crowd, I'm sure a lot of the Lean LA crowd's already familiar with Startup Weekend. We're going to be doing our version of that here on campus. We have a great group of mentors who are going to be here throughout the weekend, and we have some good judges. Zhao Yang from BetterWorks and Farmville fame will be one of the judges, along with Mike Jones from Science and a few others. And then we also have an event on April 18th. It's called Founders Meet Founders, and we're hosting that in conjunction with the Tech Bruins group. And it's an event where we're hoping there's going to be some cross-pollination for people who are interested in getting involved with a startup and may not have all the pieces in place. And we hope that that'll be another way for people to form teams and work towards our early May deadline for the applications. So I know I spoke a lot. I tried to fit it all in. We all want to hear Eric speak. So just go to Startup UCLA. You can join our mailing list, and I'm happy to speak afterwards. So I will turn it over here.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'll go real quick. My name's Joe Zuley. I'm one of the co-organizers here at Lean LA with Pete and Patrick. And I think I have the easiest job of the night because I get to introduce two guys who don't need much of an introduction at all. Eric Ries is the creator of the Lean Startup methodology. He's the former CTO at IMVU, entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School. His blog is startuplessonslearned.com, and he is a 2-time Lean LA alum. So very happy about that. Sean Ellis is the CEO at Catchfree. He's helped bring so many startups to market that I had to write them all down, and I won't go through the whole list, but a lot of very impressive companies, including Dropbox, Lookout, Zobni, Crockett. The list goes on and on. Eventbrite. He's also a Lean LA alum and one of our very first speakers that we had. I think he was like our second or third speaker. So without further ado, let's bring him on stage. So Sean, I got to ask, how did you get involved in so many different companies?
Oh, well, it actually, I spent 10 years in 2 companies, and you just spend so much time executing that you don't get the opportunity to really figure out how should this be done. And so for me, after the second one, I was just so burnt out on focusing on one company that I wanted to spend a lot of time jumping between companies and experimenting and really ruining other people's companies rather than my own, and ultimately just trying to figure out what matters and when it matters, and that's when I came across Eric, who was doing similar things, and you know, this was a few years ago, but he's obviously come a lot further with it than I did, but I had a lot of fun with it, and but you know, we were a handful of people on kind of a similar thing of just figuring out how can you be effective with these things? So how did you get into it, Eric?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. This is crazy. Wow. What you guys have to understand is that when I first met Sean, okay, it was like in the dark ages of like 2009, okay, so 100 years ago. And back then, like writing blogs about entrepreneurship and being a startup blogger, even in Silicon Valley, was like not at all considered cool. And so when I first like took my first like nervous steps out into the startup blogging world, I was so embarrassed about it, I didn't even put my name on the blog. It just said Startup Lessons Learned. It didn't say by who, just by itself. And you know, just they had been learned in the passive voice. And you know, when I finally talked to customers and the 5 readers that I had, that I said, hey, what do you think about this? This is a blog, so it's the internet. Everything is forever. You can read it yourself. And I really did say, "Lo, my 5 readers, who are you?" And we did a little survey because who are you talking to? And they were like, well, "Who are you?" Like let's. So I put my name on it, and at that time there were maybe 5 other startup bloggers. So like when a new startup blogger showed up on the scene, like to those 5 people, it was news. And Sean Ellis was one of the very few people who was really talking about not just like how do you become famous and like pitch VCs and, you know, do PR and whatever, but like really like, what does it mean to build a startup and make it great? And so he was actually incredibly supportive and helpful when I was just starting out, and I'm always will have a very soft spot in my heart for you, so thank you for that.
That's
Appreciate
great.
it.
Thanks. So, I mean, clearly from those early days, you've figured out a lot of stuff. And what's been the process for figuring all these things out? Where did the insights just come out of the air for you? Did you trial and error into your way of figuring this stuff out, or how did you actually learn this stuff?
So like a lot of things, I learned to do these things long before I learned how to explain them or understand why they worked. So, you know, I grew up as a computer programmer, okay? I mean, as long as I can remember, I was programming computers. Definitely the best day of my life was the day I found out you could get paid for programming computers. When I was a kid, I couldn't believe it. I was like, you know, incredibly good news. And so I thought I'd be doing that my whole life. And so, you know, I had this weird intuition that agile software development would be the future. When I first encountered agile and I was doing waterfall, I was like, wow, being more iterative, having customers involved in the project sooner, that is 100% guaranteed going to make all my products succeed. And then I had this very strange experience, which those of you who are engineers will know what I'm talking about. You build something using the right methodology with amazing architecture, incredible technology, and then nobody uses it. And even today, most of the products I've ever built in my whole life, nobody is using. And, you know, so for those who are new to this, like, hi, I'm a big failure. If you follow me, you too can be a big failure. So just be forewarned, the exit, they pointed out all the fire exits, you can still leave, it's okay. And so I thought, you know, when Agile didn't solve all my problems because all it did was help me build much more efficiently products that nobody would use. And I was like, why is it so great to do something on time and on budget if nobody uses it? That doesn't seem right. And so I had this intuition that we should go much faster than the standard of Agile. We should have customers much more involved in the development of our products. And so when I was finally in a position to do something about it, was my third startup, which was InView. You know, I was in charge of the technology team. I was the main technical co-founder. And so we did it my way. And, you know, now I tell the story, and these startups kind of blowing up, and it's great, and people think continuous deployment, split testing, those things are now considered to be, at least in some circles, maybe in this room, like pretty good idea. At that time, there was no literature on those things. They were considered absolutely crazy. And I had many moments where, you know, with my co-founders, they'd be like, wait, we're going to do what again? And I'd be like, yes, we're going to, like, as soon as the software is written, we will immediately deploy it to production. And now, you know, continuous deployment's a discipline with a cluster immune system and all this infrastructure to prevent us from having problems. But in those days, continuous deployment was a one-line rsync shell script on my laptop. Okay, and that was it. And I was like, no, we're going to push to production, and then we have problems. We're going to learn from that, and then we'll deal with those problems, and we'll develop that discipline. And people thought I was absolutely nuts. But my co-founders, I'm actually very grateful to them because they had faith in me. And I said, listen, trust me, try this. I think it's going to work. And if it does, you know, we'll keep trying it, and if it doesn't, you know, you can fire me and get a new one. I'm not totally irreplaceable. And there were definitely some moments when it was a close thing. So I'm very grateful to them for having the patience to stick it out. So we did that stuff, and I could see firsthand that it was working. But I couldn't explain to anybody why it worked because it made no sense. It was, you know, much too fast by traditional standards, much too sloppy. It just didn't make sense. And like, what are customers doing in the building? That makes no sense. And like I kid you not, when we first started raising money for InView, VCs would send their technical due diligence guy to like interview us and make sure that like the technical due diligence was fine. And they would talk to me, and you know, this would be some gray-haired veteran of the software industry, and he'd be like, okay, tell me how this works. And I'd explain to them both our architecture and our process and everything. And he'd be like, no, listen, kid, that is not how it's done. And I'm just, you know, you got to give me a different answer to that question because I can't take that answer back to the VC. They're not going to do the deal. And I didn't know any better. I was like, you know, the way you're describing, that's what seems stupid to me. So we had a little bit of a difference of opinion. and we, like a lot of VCs would not invest. So like, well, I want to do this deal. I believe in the business, but this technical due diligence, you know, failed. So I mean, it was not obvious to people that this was a good idea. So I got really good. I got a lot of practice. Every employee we hired, every investor we talked to, everybody, I had to try to convince them that this way of working made sense. Because we would hire people who were gray-haired veterans of the software industry, and on their first day, we'd be like, you're going to ship code to production today. And they'd be like, listen, kid, this is not how it's done. Okay, that's not right. And I had to be the one to be like, with all due respect, you work for me. So, you know, you're going to try this, And if I'm wrong and it doesn't work and it's a bad idea, like we'll learn from that together. But try it, you may like it. So it was like that Dr. Seuss book, all the time, try it, you may like it. And so I had a lot of practice. And then when I finally started blogging, I felt like in order to tell these stories and have them be comprehensible, I needed to understand not just what worked, but why. And that's really where all the theory and like the lean manufacturing roots and agile development, customer development, all those ideas kind of came together to produce what I think is a coherent whole that just allowed me to answer people's questions. Like, okay, sure, this worked for InView with 3D avatars, but how do I know it will work in my enterprise software business? I had someone once come up to me and they're like, well, sure, it works with your 3D avatar thing, but I'm doing 2D avatars. So people will seize on anything, any detail. They'll be like, well, the most common response I've always gotten, for years, is like, that sounds like a great idea for somebody else to do. Obviously, I can't do it in my business, but in that, the person next to me, they should really definitely get right on that. So really I really wanted to answer those questions in an honest way. So I felt like I actually knew what I was talking about. And so I spent a lot of time really trying to figure out, well, what are the principles behind these techniques? Why do they work? And then how could we adapt them to different contexts?
It's amazing how blogging just crystallizes the thinking, isn't it?
It's hard.
Because you have to be able to support it. And people have a long time to read the words and sort of say, well, you missed this, idiot. So it's, you're constantly adding the pieces until you've got something that actually works together. And
I can't imagine having to develop ideas in private. I don't know how that was ever, no surprise, that's who you're talking to, but just the same impulse around product development to want to do it in the open with constant input, blogging is the same thing. So I found it to be really incredibly helpful. If you go back and read the early posts, I can't even read them anymore. They're so idiotic. I'm just like, what was I thinking? I can't believe that was the state of the art.
Are you tempted to go back and update them?
All the time. Are you kidding? Oh yeah, because
he knew it 3 years ago. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And then it could finally fit the movie. Because in the movie, you have a great idea, like epiphany from the skies, and then, we always talk about that intermediate part, the photo montage, little 2 minutes of no dialogue, like just something happens, and then you're on the cover of magazines, and then we move on to the more interesting stuff. So, obviously, part of my message is all the actual real work of startups happens during the photo montage. It can't make it into the movie because it's too boring. But, so yeah, I would love my own story to fit the movie, because then they can make a movie out of it. This actual story, think about how complicated and kind of boring it was. It's like, that's not going to make a good movie.
So there's a good mix today here. Entrepreneurs that are probably serial entrepreneurs, students that are thinking about becoming founders, and really everything in between. What do you think is the best way to learn this stuff, especially somebody who's just aspiring to be an entrepreneur? Is it, do you read it and get into it and experiment and learn it, or the other side is something like a PayPal, where a lot of people were along for the ride, and it was like the best apprenticeship ever for startups. If you were going to advise somebody getting into it, would you tell them to join an existing startup? Would you tell them to just get out there and do it on their own? What are your thoughts?
Well, the most important thing is to be doing something. And with all due respect to this event right now, which we are doing right now, which is 100% talking, no doing. This is, I hope, will be for some people inspirational to get out and do something. But the learning, you don't learn anything about entrepreneurship in a room like this, unless someone's out there doing customer development, selling something. At South by Southwest, we had a room that was, we were at Fire Code, so there was a huge line to get into our venue, and so people literally would not leave. The best tweet of the whole South by for me was, ironic at the Lean Startup track that you cannot get out of the building. those that know will know why that's funny. And so they actually had some startups bringing pizza in and selling it at a huge markup. And so anyone who's selling pizza right
Porta
now.
potties.
Yeah, exactly. That is learning. That counts. Everything else is just pontificating, which is fancy word for BS. So you have to do something to learn. But what I call the Nike school of entrepreneurship, which is just do it and everything will be fine. I can speak firsthand that is not the most effective way to learn, because as soon as you have even 2 customers, you will immediately have 5 opinions about what you should do next. And so it's just do it. You're well, just do what? And I meet a lot of people. A lot of my early consulting clients were graduates from the famous accelerator programs, and they would raise money, and finally out there and they have the product and they have customers, and they're now what? And they're VCs, and all the people are we're done. Our work here is done. We funded you. We got you into the market. You had your TechCrunch bump. everything, the rest is up to you. And if you don't know what to do, that actually can be really painful. So in terms of doing it yourself versus joining a startup, it really has to do with what's your tolerance for embarrassment and humiliation. How much can you tolerate being incredibly, incredibly embarrassed? And going back to the movies, just on a kind of a movie theme today, I don't know why. In the movies about entrepreneurship, you know those scenes where the plucky protagonist has an older mentor or somebody who they tell, I'm gonna quit my very good job or my prestigious school and go out and do this crazy thing that makes no sense. And the skeptics are always like, listen, kid, don't do that. That is not a good idea. Stay the course. And then the most satisfying part of any movie is when the protagonist gets to go back to those people and be like, see, I told you so. You were mean to me. You didn't support me. You beat me up in high school or whatever. Now look at me. I'm on the cover of magazines. You were wrong. In real life, I want you to visualize the experience of having to go back to those people and be like, remember when you said I was crazy to do this, it would never work? You were right. Okay? There is nothing, I kid you not, there's nothing more painful, embarrassing than that. So if if you're prepared for that, then do it yourself. But not everybody is. Not everybody is in a financial position, from a personal risk tolerance point of view, to be able to do it. And not everybody has the kind of connections and network and kind of all the skills that you need to really be a founder. And I think that's okay. The entrepreneurship ecosystem requires a lot of people to develop entrepreneurial skills and to be employee number 1, number 10, number 100, number 1,000 at startups. And there's honor in all of those things. So I'm a big fan of apprenticeship and also of doing it yourself. In fact, I did both along the way, and they were both incredibly important to me. So yeah, that's the greatest non-answer ever, because definitely both will work out great.
So do you think if PayPal had sort of figured out its business model that it ultimately succeeded with and had just right out of the gate come up with that, and do you think that there would be so many spin-offs? I mean, for people who don't understand, yeah. PayPal had started out in something completely different and did lots of pivots along the way to get where it went to, but you name a startup, it probably has a founder that was at PayPal.
Yeah, it's incredible. And there's a couple, there's every once in a while there's a company like that just has the right combination of factors. And you're right, I think part of it is the difficulty. The screw-ups are just as important, just as educational as the things that they got right. That spawns a lot of other founders. One of the companies that I worked at, first company I worked at in Silicon Valley, that spent 5 years in stealth R&D and $50 million to get the first product out the door. And that should be all you need to know to predict what happened. Epic disaster. If you added up the total valuation of all of the ex-employees of that company who became founders, it must be amazing. It was an incredibly talented group of people, and we all went through this incredibly cathartic lesson together. And all of them, not one person involved with that company, as far as I can tell, has gone on to repeat that mistake, because we all had it seared into our, into the deepest part of our bones. Never, ever, 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 just assume that your plan is going to work out, raise a lot of money, do the big hype launch, and hope for the best. Because, you can wind up wasting years of your life. So I do think that, being in that kind of constructive failure environment is super helpful. One of the stories I tell in the book, the famous story of Groupon. Who knows what the first Groupon was? Anyone? Pizza. Some people know the story. Okay, so before it was called Groupon, Groupon was called The Point. And The Point was a petition, an online activism site, where it still had deals that would tip, but the deal is not get free stuff. The deal was, let's all go to City Hall and protest some issue. And when 100 of us all sign the petition, it'll tip, and we'll all agree to go do the protest. Doesn't that seem like a brilliant idea? And they spent a year and $1 million building The Point. No traction, no success, nothing. And they were running out of money. It's a classic pivot moment where it's the last minute, board's getting mad at you, running out of money. It's all hell's breaking loose. Let's just try something different. And they had this idea for the coupon, and for those who yelled out pizza, that's right, the very first Groupon. They didn't build any technology. They just had this WordPress blog that they had skinned to say Groupon, and they created this deal with the pizza restaurant in the lobby of their building. Okay? That pizza restaurant is still there. I have eaten there. Pretty good pizza. And the deal was 2-for-1 pizza at the pizza restaurant. When anyone redeemed the coupon, literally they're on their Apple laptop using PDF Maker, emailing them one coupon at a time to each customer. Okay, it's this very low budget, very inexpensive minimum viable product. 20 people redeemed the coupon. So they basically gave away 20 free pizzas. Now I want you to think about if you had been there. I'm not smart enough for this, but maybe if you had been there, you would have been like, oh yeah, 20 free pizzas, obviously fastest company in history to get to $1 billion in sales. What could be more obvious? Like, I would have invested at that moment, obviously, right? No. Now, how come, like I know a lot of founders who do first MVPs and give away 20 free pizzas and declare failure and go home. Because they're like, well, that doesn't seem like very many. And of course, that's classic entrepreneur fallacy like 101, which is if you don't make a prediction about what's supposed to happen, then you have no way to judge whether you actually had a success or a failure. That's a big mess. The thing I want to point out about this Groupon story is they understood how significant it was to give away 20 free pizzas because they had just spent a year trying to get customers to do anything at all. Okay? So to them, 20 free pizzas were like, OMG, this is awesome. And they were like, let's try that again. Let's try t-shirts and and they got on that train and they were off to the races. So it's actually the failure that creates the opportunity for learning. And that's why we spend so much time in Lean Startup talking about failure, not because we love failure, but because if you can't fail, then you can't learn. And so there is no pivot. If you just get everything right by magic, then you don't actually learn anything, and that can be just as harmful as struggling to do something wrong. So yeah, I think to go all the way back to your story about PayPal, I think it was those struggles and failures that was critical to the education that all those entrepreneurs got.
Mm-hmm. So kind of taking a step back and, again, everybody's got sort of different understandings of Lean Startup and what that means. Can you give us just the quick elevator pitch on what actually is a Lean Startup? What's the little bite-sized chunk that you introduce to people?
Sure, yeah. I am happy to do this. So the most important thing to understand is that the word lean in Lean Startup comes from something called lean manufacturing, which is a system of management that originated in Japan with the Toyota production system. And lean manufacturing was a breakthrough in how things are made because it had this recognition that if we reevaluate the way we do work, we come to realize that some of the things that we do are value creating, actually matter to customers, and most of what we do is actually waste. It's stuff that we do to satisfy ourselves or because we think it's supposed to happen or because we think it makes things more efficient, but doesn't actually deliver value for customers. And all of the Lean Toolkit is about learning to tell the difference between what creates value and what is wasteful. But lean manufacturing, like all 20th century general management, works when you already know who the customer is because you can evaluate through the eyes of the customer. And the question for Lean Startup is, how do we figure out the difference between value and waste when we don't even know who our customer is yet? And all of the work that we do is to learn who our customer is, learn how to build a sustainable business so that one day we can go back to using the toolkit of lean manufacturing and general management. And so our definition of value is what we call validated learning. Not just a good story like, hey, I learned something. Okay, that's like the oldest excuse in the book. It doesn't count. But really to be able to prove quantitatively, scientifically, that we are figuring out how to build a sustainable business. And then all of the specific tools in Lean Startup, some of which I've already mentioned, like continuous deployment, cohort analytics, A/B split testing. We can talk about as many of these as people want tonight. All of those tools are designed to accelerate our fundamental cycle time. In manufacturing, the fundamental cycle time is how much time elapses between when we get an order and when we have shipped a high-quality product to the customer, and we want to collapse that time down. For Lean Startup, we have a feedback loop we call build, measure, learn, which is a fancy way of saying how much time elapses between when we have an idea and when we have validated whether that idea is brilliant or crazy. And so that is the kind of framework of principles under which all these specific techniques come out. And most people will have heard of Lean Startup through one of the techniques or one of the tactics. And what I hope the message people will get tonight is really it is about those principles of thinking about entrepreneurship in a more scientific way. And how to do.
It's good. Is it still evolving, or is it something that it's pretty well understood at this point? And if it is evolving, where does the inspiration come from?
Well, I think what we know today about entrepreneurship is the tiniest tip of the iceberg. So not only is it still evolving, I think most of the things that we need to figure out as a society, we have not yet even begun to ask the right questions. So as far as we have come as a movement for change, I think we are just at the very, very beginning. So actually, even the people in this room who are coming to this for the very first time, who've never heard about Lean Startup, but their friend said, hey, come to this thing, they have free food. Even you have the opportunity to be true early adopters of something that I think is going to be really important. It is about taking entrepreneurship and turning it into a management science. Now, here's the funny thing about this. Because I wrote this book, and because it was a bestseller, and because the press loves a story about a hero who in Act 1 has a great idea, in Act 2 there's a photo montage, in Act 3 everything's great, right? We already talked about that. People love that story, it sells magazines, so I get the credit for Lean Startup, and that's been great for me, okay? I really enjoy it. The truth is, I am the face of something that is actually, the actual work is happening in organizations like Lean LA. So, to me, I have my experiences in the companies I've worked with, and that's, a certain data set that's been very helpful to me. But what we need to do as an ecosystem, as a startup industry, if you will, is we have to run thousands more experiments to really find out what works and what doesn't. So the inspiration for the next evolution of these ideas always has and always will come from the actual practitioners who are putting them into practice right now. So in this room are people who I believe right now are advancing the state of the art in entrepreneurship. And my plea whenever I come to groups like Lean LA is please make sure you tell me what you learn so I can update the rest of the groups, because I do a lot of these talks, and so I have an opportunity to share what is learned in one region with another. I know there's a few reporters in the room too, and part of the story of Lean LA, and the reason why I was so excited to do this event and see such an incredible turnout here, there's this, people in the mainstream media and journalists are starting to get interested in startups. It's finally oh yeah, there's something's going on with the startup thing. It's getting really cool and exciting. And that's probably a leading indicator of the beginning of the end for this current summer experience. With all due respect to the journalists in the room. The tendency, of course, to paint this as San Francisco versus New York, or the focus on the Silicon Valley ecosystem. I think most people basically watch Silicon Valley like a reality TV show now. I always have to be those are actually real people. They're not TV characters. I know them. They're not exactly like it looks like in the reality TV show, just like on The Real Housewives. But entrepreneurship, the movement that we are all part of, is much bigger than just a Silicon Valley phenomenon. I think there is this, I don't have to tell you, but just for the journalists in the room, there is a worldwide entrepreneurial renaissance in progress right now that I think is unprecedented in history. There are more entrepreneurs practicing in more places than at any time in history. And the real story is not the PR-driven hype machine of, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not even going to name names. You know exactly what I mean. The real story is in organizations like this. So can I just get a quick show of hands? For whom is this their very first Lean LA event? Okay, wow. So everybody else now put up your hands. Who's been a member of Lean LA before? Okay, keep your hands up. Everybody else, look at those people and talk to them tonight. Don't come and network with me, network with them. The laboratory of entrepreneurship, the actual advancing of the state of the art, are the people who just raised their hands, who are actually trying to figure out, not just, hey, how do I make a quick buck and make a lot of money as an entrepreneur, although many of you, I'm sure, will make a lot of money. That's great. What is really happening is trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, and then come together at events, not like this where there's a big fancy speaker and a big stage, but come together in events where we can actually share with each other what's working, what's not, again, to advance the state of the art. So, part of my agenda in dragging some journalists down to this event was to try and get that message out to say, look, this is not on the hype machine radar, but it's actually much more significant than the much more photogenic stories, if you know who I'm talking about. So thank you all for doing this.
The one thing that I would say is that with all the sort of hype and buzz around this, you can easily lose focus on how amazing it is. I had a conversation this week with somebody who clearly had been in a hole for the last couple of years and hadn't seen some of this learning across startups that's been communicated, and lots of people have processed it and shared it and taken it to next levels. And that used to be how every conversation was, and it was surprising to see someone who clearly, someone with a pretty good idea, but sort of some of the fundamental sort of premise upon which that idea was built was fairly shaky, and so much focus on, I can build this, and not very much focus on, should it be built, and how do I challenge that assumption? And to me, that was sort of the wake-up call of, that's how every conversation used to be, and it's amazing now that that's the rare exception. And so, like, I wouldn't underappreciate how much you've actually moved it forward and changed it based on capturing the learning of a lot of people and processing that and institutionalizing it, and having a #2 bestseller book doesn't hurt either. But ultimately, I do think that it's in the long run, it's going to have a big impact on the number of successful startups that get out there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
So, having been in a startup now myself for the last year and a half, and trying to put a lot of this in practice, I executed in the past on gut and had some of these things sort of thought through, but now there's a better playbook to refer to. I found that there's a couple of challenges along the way.
Let's get into it.
One is the team motivation question, that ultimately keeping a team excited and plugged in and enthusiastic requires a certain amount of rah-rah cheering that kind of that like, oh, it couldn't possibly go wrong. Let's go. Let's all jump off that cliff. We'll land perfect. We won't hit a rock. And it's hard to kind of keep that going. So if you could talk to that. And then the second piece that I found is you can get so caught up in the validated learning piece that it turns into something that feels like an academic exercise rather than ultimately trying to build a business that will scale and affect lots of people. So if you could kind of talk to, I know that's two fairly broad things, but those are two of the challenges.
Listen, I mean, and those are questions that only someone who's actually pushing the boundaries would run into. So, I mean, I want us to talk about this because there's a lot of people who should be so lucky to ever encounter the problems that you're talking about.
I feel lucky every day.
Yeah, right. It's like that is entrepreneurship. You never get a gold star for doing a good job. You never get promoted. There's no bonus. You just get to stay alive. That's it. That's what you get. That's what you win. There's no leveling up to the next boss. Like, none of that. It's just your company's alive. You get to deal with the next problem. Congratulations. That's winning. We're gonna wind up having deterred some people by the end of this night, I feel like. Well, good.
Might be a good thing to be.
Yeah, it'd be a good thing if that scares you, man. Don't go work at Goldman Sachs or something. Okay. Both of those questions really speak to the role of vision in the startup, and this is something that I think is hard for people to grasp because it sounds like what Lean Startup is about is speed and iteration and kind of testing stuff, and then like if it's not working, giving up and doing something else. And that doesn't actually sound like long-term vision-based thinking, because we have this intuition as human beings that if you have a big vision, you must do big projects, and they do things that take a long time. And so quick testing seems at odds with the big vision, and that is where a lot of the, in the traditional model, that's where the morale came from. It's like, listen, I got the vision, I know for sure that this thing is going to work out 5 years from now. So everybody just do what I say for the next 5 years, and then it's gonna be fine. And the nice thing about that is for 4.99 years, everyone's having a great time and everything's going really well. So that is a very effective way to keep people aligned towards a direction. But in that way of working, any reality that does not match the vision can be a detriment to morale. And so, traditionally the way that entrepreneurs have motivated their employees is to keep them in this reality distortion field bubble, prevent any information from getting in. And I think that, we're obviously trying to get away from that. But then, since that's what we're all used to, it raises this issue. Well, how do you get excited about the fact that you're invalidating all your assumptions and nothing's working? That's not, on its face, exciting. And I think the key to that is we have to make and I screwed this up big time in a bunch of companies. And when I first started talking about this stuff, I did not understand that this was so important. Actually, all of this short-term testing and iterating is actually in the service of a long-term vision. If you don't have a long-term big vision, you don't need all this technique. Minimum viable product. If you're building a minimum product, you don't need to waste time testing out the different assumptions. Just go build it and ship it, and you're done. Right? The whole thing can be done quickly. It's only if you're trying to accomplish something really great, really change the world, that I think you owe it to yourself to really be systematic about figuring out which parts of the strategy are working and which aren't. But it requires really making an affirmative case that the reason we are pivoting and testing is because we are staying true to the vision. So actually executing a successful pivot is a win. It's actually great news. It means we're getting closer to our goal because now we have a better understanding of where we're headed. And that's I talked about the pivot meeting at the 11th hour. That's usually when it's done. Okay, usually we have a conversation about whether to pivot or not when the walls are on fire, the roof is caving in, the bank account is down to the last dollar, and it's an unbelievably stressful thing. So one suggestion I have to really get people excited about those conversations is to say, you know what, since we know for sure that we're going to have to pivot along the way, it's a routine thing that we're definitely going to have to do, let's just schedule the meeting in advance. Let's just put it on the calendar so that it can't be a morale problem. And let's just do it regularly, like every 6 or 8 weeks, or whatever the right periodicity is for your business. Be like, listen, this is the meeting, and it's called the Pivot or Persevere meeting. And what we do in this meeting is decide if our strategy is fundamentally working or not. Now, first of all, just putting it on the calendar already alleviates an incredible amount of stress. Because now it's not news that like, oh my God, senior management is having a pivot meeting. Like, oh, Dave McClure's not here, so I gotta watch my mind. Are we screwed? But here's the really important part. Then we can start to work backwards from the meeting to say, well, what information would we want to have in the pivot meeting to figure out if our strategy is working or not? And then you can say, wait a minute, why are we doing this like giant press campaign to get myself on the cover of this magazine? Is that going to help me learn if my strategy is working 8 weeks from now? No. That's, at best could get me a bunch of customers, but that's not the goal. A goal is to learn how to build a sustainable business. So a one-time unsustainable spike of usage, that doesn't do anything for us. And you might say, wait, why am I working on this feature that that will take like 8 months to build? Will that help me figure out if we're on the right track 8 weeks from now? No, I'm gonna have to figure out something much smaller to get the learning sooner. So you start to help to impose that discipline, and then we can get excited, not just about the decision to pivot, but also the decision to persevere. Because we can say, look, here's evidence that we're actually on the right track. Because I think the reason why, I think one of the biggest problems with the pivot meeting is not just that people can't agree on what to do, is that we can't even agree on how we're doing right now. In most companies, if I put everybody in an isolation booth and I polled each person in the company and said, tell me if the company is making progress and how do you know? If I poll N people, I will get N different answers. Because all of us have our own kind of private reality that we live in where like generally the stuff that we do is really making a difference and working, and the stuff that those other idiots in the company do is really not working as well. So we can't even agree on whether the current strategy is working because we're not operating from a common set of facts. And so part of this is getting everybody on the same page so that we have a common set of evaluation criteria in the Pivot or Persevere meeting, so that then we can all be like agreed, hey, this actually is working, we're making progress, or you know what, it's been 6 months and we're basically in the same place that we were 6 months ago, this isn't working. And either way, we can get excited about it. What do you think about that?
Cool.
Okay.
I like it. I was taking some notes.
Amen. The last time I did this on stage with somebody, they actually wound up pivoting their business like a couple weeks later. And then like it led to a bunch of layoffs, and then people were like mad at me. Sorry.
I have to schedule that Pivot or Persevere meeting far enough out so that we can work our way toward it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. Yeah, please do.
Work backwards one day. Yeah. We're screwed. So it's interesting you talk about vision as being an important thing. There's a local company here, Chill, was namesake, and a lot of times when people talk about pivots, it's same vision, different strategy. Clearly, that was not a same vision, different strategy. That's like a completely different business. How is that? Is there a certain point where you just say, this vision is not even something we should go after. That looks more interesting, and jump over there. Are there other examples where things like that work?
Well, there's definitely, I have to be very careful with this. From the outside, it often seems like, these two businesses have nothing to do with each other. In fact, I don't think it would be that much of a stretch to be like The Point and Groupon. Come on, that's like political software versus coupons. I mean, really, what does that have in common? That's not a pivot. But I'm very hesitant. Unless I was there with the founders going through the process, I don't judge. Because I actually think that people learn more than they realize, and that oftentimes the thread of continuity for the founders makes a certain amount of sense, and they did learn something critical. And oftentimes, and I don't know if this is, I don't know the namesake to Chill story well enough to comment, but
We've got some representatives here who can fill in some gaps.
We'll hear it in the Q&A. I'd love to hear. I mean, quite often you'll see social products go from synchronous to asynchronous in their communication model. and a bunch of other stuff will change. But like that, there's like a realization that the kind of social connectivity that you want to foster is not possible with the wrong model. And then once you make that change, it can lead to like a cascade of all the changes that make the thing from the outside unrecognizable. From the inside, it makes sense. So as long as to the founders, the pivot makes sense, then I'm happy to call it a pivot. Here's one other thing that I think is really amazing about entrepreneurship. And I'm from San Francisco, so this may sound a little woo-woo, and I'm sorry. Actually, entrepreneurship is a process of self-discovery. Because although, like in my book, I put this diagram, and it's like vision, strategy, product. A very nice like pyramid, and it's like, look, you don't change the vision, you change the strategy, that's a pivot. We change the product every day, that's an optimization. Okay, it's like a way to keep separate these three important concepts. But in reality, it's very hard to tell what's in the vision, what's in the strategy, and what's in the product. We often get confused. Because when we have a vision, when we see that perfect future, with our product has changed the world, we see it in unbelievable clarity. We see it down to the specific features and the specific magazines that we were on the cover of, and like what kind of car we drive. I mean, we really see that world in a lot of detail. That's what it means to be an entrepreneur. So we sometimes get attached to some product feature that actually turns out to be totally irrelevant. So I learned this the hard way. Because what happens is when you're finally successful, your mind instantly goes back in time and erases all the memories of you making mistakes or thinking anything stupid to make you look like a genius so that in your own internal movie, you're the protagonist. And I know that happened to me because when we did InView, a big issue around InView, and I talk about this a lot in the book, for those who haven't read it, you can learn all about this, was about whether it's a social product with 3D avatars, whether you use it with your existing friends or you'd use it to make new friends. And that doesn't sound like a very big difference, but it's really a fundamental issue. And so we got a lot of things right in the first version of InView, but we also got a lot of things wrong. Now, I remember when my co-founders and I first founded the company, I can visualize the room we were in when we decided, you know what, we're going to do this, and we started plotting out the product features and the strategy and the vision. We didn't have that language for it. We just started plotting our plan on a whiteboard. And I can remember, I see it in my mind's eye as clear as day, writing on that whiteboard with my co-founders, arguing about what things we were going to do and what not, and what features would be and what milestone release and all this stuff. And in my mind's eye, the way I remember it, I'm the one saying all the right things, and my co-founders are always arguing for the wrong things. I can hear their voices saying we should go in the wrong direction, and me saying, no, that's not true. Now, due to a quirk of the way InView's offices worked, the specific whiteboard we did this planning on got lost right after we were done having that meeting. I don't know what happened. It got, like, someone put it in a storage room temporarily, and we forgot about it. We couldn't find it. Anyway, it disappeared for years. And then we had an office move a couple years ago. And so like 3 years later, it reappeared. Here it is. And I was looking at this whiteboard, and I was like, somebody tampered with this whiteboard. Somebody went back in there and changed things in my handwriting to be not how I remember them. Like, it made me look a lot stupider. And I was just staring. It was like, here is the fossil record proof of what I used to think was the vision, product, and strategy for this business. And it's wrong. So I'm now very hesitant to pass judgment on that kind of thing, because actually what happens is, in the process of failing and testing and iterating, we actually discover what we really care about and not care about. And there was a moment when InView had to do a very important pivot away from hanging out with your friends and towards making new friends online. And I document it in the book. We could have done a different pivot in that moment. We could easily have said, you know what? What we care about is the communication technology of connecting with your friends. We should really make more like a Facebook kind of thing. And to heck with its 3D avatars. Okay, that could have worked out pretty well in 2004 too. So it's not like it was the right thing to do to say, no, what we're committed to is this like specific kind of online socializing that we think is really exciting. It was actually, we discovered in that moment which of those two things were actually important to us. And then we said, oh, wait a minute, this particular communication technology, that was just a strategic choice to get ourselves into the market. Now that we've realized it doesn't work, we don't really care about that. We can jettison it, no problem. By no problem, I mean, it took us 6 months, but we finally were able to let it go. So we actually learned more about our vision by doing that work than we would have by meditating and just pondering the future.
Well, so I have a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. Awesome. And they can probably build on this one, but you've talked with a lot of people. Where do people really struggle with lean? I brought up a couple areas where I personally have struggled with it. Are there other common areas that are hard for people? I mean, obviously.
Yeah, listen, it's all hard. I mean, I want to be honest about this. what we're trying to do is shift entrepreneurs' odds of being successful like a few percentage points, a little bit. We cannot guarantee anyone to be successful. We cannot make this easy. We cannot make it glamorous and fun. Okay, that's not how it is. It's hard and embarrassing and excruciating. That's still true, but we can now, make it slightly more likely, slightly less likely to die. Okay, that's still pretty good. I would say the biggest mistake people make is they get obsessed with some specific tactic from the Lean Startup Toolkit. So I was just talking to a company one of my early companies that I advised, and I taught them how to do split testing. And then I had not heard from them in a while, and one of their ex-employees was now founding another company, and I was advising that company, and they said, this weird thing happened at Company X, I will not name any names. They became obsessed with split testing. And he's like, it got to the point where it didn't matter, like you could suggest the stupidest, most ridiculous thing, and they'd be like, well, let's split test it. Might work. And it did, and they're like, and if you were like, wait, no, this is like ethically wrong, and it's like screwing customers over, and it's horrible for our brand, and it's taking us in the weird other direction. But like, if it like made us like slightly more money, like they'd be like, well, sorry, the split test said, so we have to. And it was like, and this person was obviously very depressed about it, and he's like, oh, Lean Startup really didn't work for them. And I was like, oh no, that is not what I'm trying to do. Having the data tell you what your vision is like getting into your car and booting up your GPS and be like, GPS, where do I want to go today? It doesn't know. It's just a robot. It just tells you where, it helps you get where you want to go. It helps you find the right path. This is, the destination is our vision. The strategy is the specific path to get there. If we run into an obstacle, I guess in LA this happens not that infrequently, right? Traffic, freeway shut down or whatever. Like there's an LA marathon on Sunday. Like how the city functions, I do not understand. Then the GPS can help you find that there's another route. If you drive all the way down to San Diego and around a huge loop, you can get where you want to go. So that makes sense. Like that makes sense. If you just focus on the data and split testing and driving the numbers up, it will not be very long before you are selling pornography. Or a psychic hotline, or some other ridiculousness, right? Because it's like, well, whatever makes people click. It's like, yeah, it's not, no. The point of the testing is to help you learn whether and how to reach your vision. Okay, that's what this is all about. And that same mistake is true for a minimum viable product, because like part of doing minimum viable product is being willing to put out a product that you think is incomplete or crappy. And some people are like, oh, well, if that's true, then the crappier the better. It's like, no. You don't get bonus points because your MVP is crappy and customers hate it. Like, it's not good. The point is, what is the minimum I have to do in order to learn how to get to a sustainable business? And that's true, technique after technique after technique. You can go nuts with it. And you're talking to customers. Be like, I love talking to customers. I'll talk to customers all day long. I never do anything. Just keep talking like that. You don't get any bonus points for that. There's no like, hey, you got a gold star for talking to customers. And then, and what Sean was talking about like being obsessed with validated learning. You're like, this becomes this like beautiful academic laboratory for discovering what customers want, like in great detail. It's like, no. You don't get bonus points for that either. So part of this is not just the tactics, but trying to actually hold ourselves accountable for real and important milestones. And in the book, I try to call this system innovation accounting. It's probably the newest and most controversial addition to Lean Startup that is new in the book, is that if we're just trying to learn for learning's sake, then we're in an academic institution. We're not actually a startup anymore. And we have some colleagues here at UCLA who are doing that, and I have great admiration for academics. It's not a bad thing. It's just your VCs didn't sign up for that. Okay, so they think you're doing something different. So what we're trying to do is figure out what are the kind of milestones that we can hold people accountable to, that will give them the freedom to use these different techniques to learn, but that the only way to to achieve the milestone is to have the learning. And it's kind of hard to explain, like without a lot of detail, and so I had to write a whole book about it. It is a mathematical argument for what product market fit means. So most people have heard the term product market fit. Mark Andreessen usually gets the credit for having popularized the term. It's basically one of those things that you know it when you see it. When a startup is really crushing it and the product's flying off the shelves, you're like, wow, that is a great fit between what the company makes and the market that they're in. My favorite example is my friend Mitch Kapor, when he created Lotus 123, the original spreadsheet, Lotus sold $54 million worth of 123 in their first year of operations. That's $1983 for those keeping score. And they went public the second year. I guarantee you not even one time in Lotus's history was anyone like, do you think we're getting close to product market fit? Okay. No, it was just like, get the things onto the shelves. They actually put software in boxes and put it on shelves. Can you believe it? No, that's a great concept. You know it when you see it. Very helpful. When entrepreneurs call me for advice and they're like, hey, I'm trying to figure out if I have product market fit or not, I'm like, I can already answer your question. The fact that you're calling me means that you don't, because you would know it if you saw it. You wouldn't actually have any time to call me. You know, the friends I have who I used to help who now have product market fit, I can't even get them on the phone because they are like 100% focused on trying to get the company to scale and not blow up. But it doesn't help you figure out if you're getting closer to product market fit. So you could be almost on the brink of product market fit or hopelessly far away, and the traditional definition would be like, well, you know it when you see it, you don't see it, therefore you don't have it. So what I try to do in the book is make an argument for a mathematical definition of product market fit that can give us a quantitative sense of if we're getting closer to product market fit. And if people are interested, we can talk more about this, but I don't want to belabor the point because it's accounting. That's super boring. I'm sorry. I know you came for this like hot, exciting talk about entrepreneurship. And I'm like, you will fail, and we're going to talk about accounting. It's like, I think I'm 2 of 3 strikes of a professional expert out. I'm a little nervous here. Please hold the tomatoes until the end. But I think if we're willing to apply at that level of rigor, then we can put ourselves in a situation where we will both not become an academic exercise, nor will we become kind of a self-indulgent, like just running the tactics over and over again, but it'll really force us to have to think constantly about like, hey, are we on the right track and what can we do to pivot to get closer?
So my last question actually relates to product market fit. So yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, and you've defined it as you'll know it when you get there.
Yeah, I hate that.
Based on Mark Andreessen. And then obviously went beyond that. But so actually logged me in, the last company before my current one where I was long-term, we had an interesting experience with where I would sort of say the product was actually good product market fit, but we had some usability issues that were probably holding us back that I think with a lot of metrics people may have basically said, oh, we need to restart and rethink this whole thing. But ultimately, by really understanding that, ultimately, I mean, I think kind of, I'll take a little step back, that a lot of what Lean is about, a lot of what startups are about in general, is understanding sort of, if I fail, why will I fail?
Yeah.
And trying to address that thing or figure out if that thing is there. And in the case of Log Me In, we were at a point where we had a really bad first user experience. And a few people actually got through this funnel and were actually able to use the product. But in the case of Log Me In, they needed to sign up for it by filling out a form, and first they had to be interested and actually get there in the first place. Then they had to download software. Then they had to actually configure and kind of set it up. Then they had to leave the room or leave the state or whatever, and then go to a web browser, log in, and finally do a remote control session and go, wow, this is cool. So you can imagine that 99.9% of people fell off somewhere along the way, particularly if there was some complexity along the way.
Yeah.
And so for us, it was really saying, gosh, why are people not spreading the word about this? Well, like clearly, if they didn't actually do a remote control session, they're not going to spread the word. And I think if we hadn't been so tenacious about figuring out the usability piece, we may have actually said, oh, this is a bad business, let's not be in this.
Yeah.
But it was about sort of that qualitative understanding that just said, this is an execution problem. This is not a market problem or a product problem.
Yep.
It's an execution problem of that first user experience. And so part of it comes down to when you have product market fit, like we probably did,
right.
Does Lean Startup still apply after that? And then I know the answer, I think I do, because some of the things you've talked about is applying it to government, applying it to a company like Intuit. So sort of across all of these, when is it execution? Where are all the places where these principles actually touch? And when do you know if it's an execution versus actually a product problem?
Yeah, this is so annoying. I mean, it's so frustrating. Here's the thing, like usability is like critically important except when it's not important at all. It's like, wait, what? And you can read, I mean, you read blogs, but now everyone has a startup blog, and everyone's giving you advice, and all the advice is like, make sure, the first version is incredibly usable, and then the other one's like, don't worry about usability, because like, look at these other products that all suck, and they were really successful. So you're like, got it, usability and no usability, check. It's like, make sure it's really scalable. You don't want to be Friendster. And it's like, what, Facebook wasn't that scalable and didn't matter. It's like, okay, scalable and not scalable, check, right? It's like, what am I supposed to do? So part of it is trying to figure out, like have a framework for figuring out what matters when. Because all this advice is true for the specific context that person was in. So take usability. If you have the wrong product, making it easier to use makes it easier for people to realize they don't want your product. So it makes them churn out faster instead of join your and that's like totally backwards. Anyone who's had a regular job in a regular company knows that if you make the product easier to use or perform better or have slightly better marketing, that's like incremental investment for incremental gain, and so usability is critically important. So actually one of the indicators that you're ready to start doing some stuff that's more execution-oriented is that when you do execution-oriented things, they pay off in the way that you would expect. So that, like, part of the answer is experiential, is that you have to try stuff and experimental. You have to experiment with different ways of improving the product for customers to see which of them actually make a difference and which don't. And when you're in a position where you have a product that actually solves a real problem for people, things like usability and performance really are critically important. When you're in a situation where you don't have that fit at all, then it doesn't matter. But the other problem with product market fit is it implies that once you have it, you're done. And like now, we're just an execution business. But actually, since the book's come out, I've had the chance to work with a bunch of super gigantic companies that achieved product market fit in some cases like 100 years ago, and have been like riding that success like ever since, and are now in a world where that's not good enough anymore. So it's not good enough to just get product market fit one time. I actually believe the future of business is to develop what I call innovation factories, which are companies that can consistently innovate over and over again, finding new sources of product market fit for new products, and do more than just incremental, what they call sustaining innovation. And in order to do that, you have to be able to invest in sustaining and disruptive innovation at the same time in different divisions, kind of managing a whole portfolio of activities. And that, that's a whole nother headache that, when you start out as an entrepreneur, like in the movies, this never comes up. It's never like, well, now when is the right time to start having our own internal startups that we incubate? But actually I think that is just as important as getting product market fit in the first place. And so yeah, when Sean mentioned government, I was like, oh man, now I really did get the third strike of being a professional expert, and now I'm talking about government, and good God. I'll just tell one anecdote about that. I've been arguing for a couple years now that anybody who's trying to create a new product under conditions of extreme uncertainty is an entrepreneur, no matter what it says on the business card, no matter what size of organization, no matter what industry, no matter what sector, that you are entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is the management discipline of high uncertainty. And when I first got up on stage and said that, I had no idea if it was true. Okay, I was just like, this is a logical deduction of the theory, and I have no idea if what I'm saying is true, but it sounds good, so let's see what happens. And since that time, I've gotten to meet real entrepreneurs in all kinds of crazy situations, including at the Pentagon, at the Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, really, like people you would think from the outside were government bureaucrats. And at South by Southwest, which was just the other week, we did a lean startup track at South by. I was telling you about it, where people could not get out of the building, right? And one of the speakers was the CTO of HHS, a guy named Todd Park, who, we had incredible good fortune to have him be nominated to become the Chief Technology Officer of the United States, reporting to the President the day before he was speaking at our track. So it's really good timing. As a conference organizer, that's like the best thing that can ever happen to you. But look, when I told people we were going to have this government guy come speak at the track, I got a lot of tweets that were like, you're going to have who? What are you doing? This crazy government thing? What are you running for office? Like, okay, South by, it's not like these huge pro-government entrepreneurs are like, yeah, government, awesome. Like, that's not a very sympathetic crowd. And I kid you not, at the end of his hour, he got a standing ovation at South by Southwest. People were so incredibly impressed. And awesome. It wasn't, you were there, so yeah, I mean, it was just incredible to see. And it wasn't because he's so charismatic and, had some kind of great political speech. It was because he came with actual stories of applications of lean startup in the government, where they have put together internal startups and given them like 90-day, 120-day deadlines to be like, you have to not make a plan in 90 days. You have to solve the whole problem in 90 days and have the data to iterate and pivot to the next thing. And they've done that with healthcare.gov, which is a huge part of Obamacare. They've done it in the Centers for Medicare. So I mean, Medicare, okay, $500 billion budget. They've done it at the FDA. So, you know, you can go online and see the presentation. I mean, it was really awesome. And the message I think a lot of people took away from that was, one, like, wow, something awesome happening in government. Who knew? That's exciting. You can't get news about this on cable news because, like, no political anything wants to cover this. It doesn't fit the ideological categories. So, you know, this work is happening in obscurity, and yet it's incredibly important. It's really impacting people's lives. And also, people got the message, wait a minute, if they can do this at the Center for Medicare, what the hell is my excuse? Okay? You think your organization is political? Like, let me introduce you to Obamacare. Okay? Okay? That's political. Okay? That's a hard environment to do innovation in, and yet they're making it happen. So, yeah, I think the coolest thing, you know, for me personally is just gotten to see these ideas applied in domains that I never even dreamed they would be in, and I think it's
for him to highlight the results that they actually achieved using, the crazy
It was not
results.
like, there's not a hypothetical thing they might do someday. It was like, here's the stuff we've already accomplished using that idea.
Was that recorded? Do you know that's online?
The videos are not online, but they were recorded, and we were going to get them online.
Cool. Yeah, that one's worth watching because I think it does show the scope of where this can be applied, and obviously it's tailor-made for startups, so if you're not using it in a startup, you're crazy, but the fact that it can move the needle in really hard areas to make a difference is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So let's open it up for questions from the audience. We've got microphones on both sides if anyone wants to come up.
I can't actually see what's happening, but
that's all right.
Maybe we stumped the whole audience.
I see the shadow of a person.
Yeah. Hi.
Nobody else just stood up.
We stumped the whole audience. This is awesome.
So I was trying to figure out what would be a good question to ask, because the Lean Startup covers a lot of things really well. The one problem I think emotional problem I think I'm having that the Lean Startup doesn't address is the ultimate culture of the company. And, you know, I read the Y Combinator apps and all the applications for everyone, and I go and I hear Sam Teller speak at the last event I went to. And there seems to be no clear line between what is product and what is company. Because you just talked about Log Me In, that's a product, but Log Me In is also the company. Mm-hmm. So I have two clear things that I want to do. I want to build products, but I also want to build a company that will change the world by how it does things, and that is obviously important. So when do I start focusing on the company's DNA? Do I build it into the product? Do I create a company and then forget about it and make a product so that the company can survive? Have I said enough so that this seems like a question yet?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Can we talk on this?
Yes, we can. Look.
Okay, great.
No, this is
Can I sit down yet?
Yeah, you can. You got it. No, question heard, and like, yeah, this is what a pain. Had to deal with this. I mean, most entrepreneurs think they're building a product, but they're not. They're building a company. So first thing is the company is the product. That's like first thing that they don't tell you. You don't get a memo. It's like, by the way, you're an entrepreneur now. You make a company. It's like, wait, what? Just building this cool product. But you can't recruit people to come work for you if there's no product. Because like, what are they coming to work on? So yeah, I think you already said it. The company is the product, is the company. But I know, it's very confusing. It really requires careful thought because we talk a lot about process stuff in Lean Startup. All these tactics and techniques, the principles of rapid iteration, build, measure, learn. What I think people don't realize is that the culture of your company is an artifact of the past process decisions that you made. Actually, process makes culture. So like when I remember being in companies and people will like, you know, we'd have some problem and be like, God, all we have to do is change the culture and then we won't have this problem anymore. It's like, no kidding. But how? And most of the advice that you get about being a startup, like most of the advice that's out there, is all cultural advice. It's like my favorite, absolute favorite is focus is really important for startups. Anyone ever get that advice? You gotta focus. And that to me is like telling a startup to focus. It's like telling someone who's overweight they should lose weight. Yeah, thank you for that really helpful advice. But how? But how? What is the mechanism by which I will achieve focus? And that's what these process decisions are for. And in fact, the culture that we get out of all that good process it's not valuable by itself. It's there to empower the specific people that actually do the work and make the decisions. The product that we build is actually the consequence of the beliefs in people's heads that make the product. Like, so another way to look at it as an entrepreneur, like what you're doing is building the beliefs in people's heads that will cause them to build the right product. That's your product. That's even more horrible and abstract. Because now how am I supposed to get all these different people to believe that they're supposed to build what I want them to build? How do I even know what I want them to build is the right thing? I mean, all these issues come up as soon as you start to think of it that way. And so I drew this pyramid in the book. I learned this from Sean to use pyramids when we need to explain things. And the foundation is really accountability. Do we hold people accountable to vanity metrics or to real metrics? If we have the right accountability system, it will empower people to use the right process. All the stuff we've been talking about today. If we use the right process over time, we will build the right culture, a culture of meritocracy, of learning and discovery, of serving customers well. And that will allow us flexibility, absolutely. And that will allow us to attract and retain the best people who actually do a good job. Most of the time, we want to spend our time at the top of the pyramid. Fire that guy, didn't do a good job. We got to get a new CTO in here that'll solve all our problems, or whatever nonsense. Let's just try to make the culture better. Let's focus better. Let's tell everyone to be more innovative. It's like that thing in Office Space. Like, is it good for the company? That does not yield a good culture. What yields a good culture is actually creating the right process, but you can't have the right process without the right accountability. So it really requires that real depth of understanding of what causes what in order to be successful as an entrepreneur. Doesn't it seem so much easier in the movies? I just keep thinking about that all day today. I'm like, God, that's such a complicated, painful answer. I wish I had a great bumper sticker.
Sucks, doesn't it?
It does. I wish I could just be like, just do it and you'll be fine. But yeah, I wish.
Hi guys. You might have already touched on this, but I want to make sure I understand you correctly. At the end of the book, you say that those who look to adopt the lean startup as a defined set of steps or tactics will not succeed. Can you comment on how loosely or strictly one should follow techniques and principles in the book, specifically if you're just getting started with the lean methods?
Wow, someone actually read the end of the book. That's exciting.
Got to the last page.
I know, that's one of the last things in the book.
3 pages before the last.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for reading the whole thing.
One of the people that starts at the end of a book and works their way to the
That's
front.
really odd. Listen, it's actually incredibly rare that anyone ever asked me a question from that chapter. I think maybe the first time. And I said some really crazy stuff there, too. So I was really expecting it to be controversial. And I was like, all right, nobody reads, so no problem. So in Toyota Production System, they have this concept called standard work. And when people hear that, they're always like, uh-oh, standardization, routine, mechanization, that sounds awful. But actually, Toyota jobs are the most creative in the world because they believe for every job, they're always constantly trying to figure out what is the one best way to do this job and make sure that everyone who does that job is perfectly trained in how to do it the same way every time without having to really think about it. And the reason that actually fosters creativity is that when it becomes automatic, when the basics of your job become automatic, then you can start to think about the job and introspect and start to see better ways to do it. If you're doing it in a sloppy way and you're just kind of sort of doing it, then you're never really sure if the problems you're experiencing are because you were kind of sloppy that one time or actually there's a real defect in the process. So it's a cultivation of mastery of even the tiniest little job. And the same thing is true, I believe, for the adoption of Lean Startup. This is not an ideology. This is not a religion. You cannot be excommunicated. Okay, there's nothing like that. So people who get into holy wars about that is or isn't Lean Startup, that company is or is not a Lean Startup, that is a gigantic waste of time. Please save us all time. Just go be on a mailing list for something else. Okay, it's not a good use of anyone's time. But if you are starting out and you want to try this for yourself, the most helpful thing to do is to pick some specific skill that you want to master and start out by doing it exactly the right way, the way that other people talk about it. Not because you're going to be copying them forever, but because that's the way for you to develop the concept of standard work, and then you can start to customize and refine it for yourself. So don't be like that startup I mentioned that I taught them how to do split testing, and then that's all they ever did, split testing, Eric Ries style, and they never did anything else. They just stayed in the standardization phase. They didn't actually ever learn, what is this in the service of, what's it for? So do that. The great thing about us being pro-science in this movement is not only do we believe that products can be tested scientifically, we think our own theory can be tested scientifically. So the amazing thing about having a theory is the theory can help you predict what is supposed to happen if you adopt one of these techniques. And then if it does happen or doesn't happen, you can then judge, hey, was the theory correct or not? So the last thing I want you to do is be like, well, Eric's famous now, so since he says to do things, it obviously is going to work, and abdicate your responsibility as thinker. That, again, is a waste of time. Instead, think for yourself. Use this theory to try out just some little bit of it. Practice it, make sure you've mastered the technique, and then be like, hey, does this actually have the impact for my company that it said it was supposed to? And if it doesn't, then we'll have the opportunity to learn from you. You'll be the next guru. It'll be fantastic. Be very happy to follow you around for a while. That's what we want. That's the way we all achieve collective mastery, is to figure out what does and doesn't work, and that requires being as scientific in our own pronouncements as we expect everybody else to be. Does that make sense? A few people are nodding. I hope it made sense.
Good. Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry. Forgot 2 microphones.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Gal. I'm from Israel. I just landed a few hours ago.
Awesome.
And first, I'd like to invite you to our land, the Holy Land.
Okay.
We have a few startups there.
Yeah, I've heard.
Just a few.
I've heard. Send me an email.
No problem. I have a software engineering background, but my startup, it's called Foldimate, and we're doing the first automated folding machine for clothing stores, laundromats, and etc. It's a physical product. Mm-hmm. I know it's. Why am I doing it? Because I think it's going to change the world.
Awesome.
And I'm sure it's going to do that after speaking with customers, and I'm trying to rigidly follow the lean methodology and also Steve Blank's customer development and everything, but I'm still struggling with physical products applying to lean methodologies, especially on lean engineering in physical products, because if you see the engineers that I'm speaking with, and I'm telling them, listen, let's do it lean, let's do it fast, let's change it a little bit, and they say, I'm sorry, what's the scope of work? Why do we need to change it? So can you shed a little bit of light? And I would recommend if you could also, in the sake of the whole lean movement, try to also put a little bit of weight there, because I think also lean, physical lean, needs to be somehow addressed.
Yeah, thank you for that. In fact, I look forward to making your company into a case study that we will.
I'll be glad.
Yeah, once you figure out. Listen, lean startup for physical products is becoming more and more common. So it used to be that would be considered like totally way out, and people are like, what? Huh? But there's now some examples of people doing it. And the most important thing to realize is that it doesn't matter if you can iterate your product as fast as software people. What matters is, can you iterate it and learn faster than your competition? So that is a challenge. That's an engineering challenge. So the best way to get engineers excited about this is you got to go, instead of going to them and be like, hey, I want to change this, I want to change that, you got to go to them and be like, I wonder, do you think it's even possible to engineer our production process so that we can make quick changes? Do you think that it's probably impossible? Forget it. Never mind. Sorry, I even asked. And then you get the engineering mind turn. It's like, well, impossible, you say. Sign me right up. And now you just turn. That's like a little bit of engineering judo for those who need to learn about how to do that. I have been the victim many times, and so I have learned.
They're still struggling with, listen, I want to fold both shirts and pants and do it fast and do it... You will. You promise. We'll get there. We totally will. But just, on the way to shirts and pants, we have to first do shirts. I mean, just logically speaking. Let's do it faster. So let's just, as soon as the thing can fold shirts, that very day, let's ship it. Now, I'll tell you another story. Someone wrote to me. The best part about having a book out in the world is people take these ideas and use them and then write to you and tell you what happened. So I hope many of you will do the same. This company, I could only barely understand what they do. They have some kind of technology that turns trash into energy. Okay? And it's somehow related to steel furnaces, like huge plants where you put a bunch of garbage and turn it into energy. And I mean, believe me, I work in software, so I'm just like, what? Don't understand how this works. But they were working for 4 years on trying to build this technology, and they had spent millions of dollars, and things were really in a bad place. I think the CEO had quit. It was a mess. And the goal was to build a conversion machine that could do 100 tons of garbage. Or like I said, I don't even begin to understand how this thing worked, but like a giant machine. And it wasn't working. So, they were having trouble, and
they were reading the book, and they were like, gosh, what would the minimum viable product be in this situation? And so the email explained. They had in the lab a version of the incinerator that could burn 2 tons of garbage. Someone's nodding along as I'm talking. Am I telling the story correct? Someone actually know what I'm talking? Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Shake your head if I get a detail wrong. I really only barely understood the story. But they're like, well, maybe if we made the 2-ton thing for sale, as a minimum viable product, that might be it. And they had people in the lab who had said, hey, can I buy the prototype? And of course, the engineer's like, can't buy the prototype. No, it's a prototype. So they made it for sale for, what was it, $2.3 million or something like that, and sold 10 of them. And so they went from, company on the brink of disaster to bookings of $23 million. Now, I like that story because, A, there's no software in it. Not only is no software in it, I only barely understand what's going on. They didn't lack anything. Okay? They had the technology and the customer relationships and the understanding of how to make the prototype and the physical thing. They had everything they needed to be successful. The only thing that changed was just asking the question, changing the mindset a little bit to be like, wait, is this, what if the goal of what we're doing as engineers is not to just do this gigantic incinerator, but to build this MVP? What if the goal was to learn if customers would actually want it? So that simple change in mindset produced a radical change in the business. And that is really that's the payoff that all of us can achieve. And again, I always ask, if the guys with a 100-ton incinerator can do it, and you're working on a mobile app, like, what's your excuse? Okay, that's hard. Mobile app, come on, guys, this is easy. So yeah, I hope I don't know where he went, but I hope that's helpful, and I look forward to hearing how it works out for you. Thank you.
Got another question?
Hi, I'm Bo Marr, an aspiring entrepreneur. There's an article written a few months back, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was kind of interesting. He said, friends with no benefits. And he's like, we have these incredible college-educated students and PhDs all over the world. I hope they're spending their time doing something important and not just helping people get a few more online friends. And that really, I was like, wow, what's going on with that? First of all, how do you even define what's important? And then second of all, how much do you weigh that and whether that's a good startup opportunity to pursue?
Yeah, I think that perspective is profoundly ignorant. And the reason is that, first of all, like, what kind of crazy autistic person is like, by helping people have more friends, what kind of impact is that going to have? That sucks. It's like, wait, what? I understand you wanted jetpacks and that you're excited about that, but like actually making human beings happier is like one of the most like awesome things you can do with your life. So I really don't understand that way of thinking. And the reason it really bothers me is that it really misunderstands how true disruption happens. Every disruptive technology that has ever been of any significance in the world started out as a toy and started out doing something that didn't seem relevant at all. So, you think about Facebook on college campuses with like just allows you to poke somebody else. And you'd be like, poke, And if I were to be like, this poke app is going to take down the government of Tunisia one day. You'd be like, what are you smoking, right? That's crazy. But like, we can't extrapolate exponential change. We're not good at that as human beings. So yeah, I think, if you look at the first personal computers, if you look at the first automobiles, just pick your technology, pick your change. Look at what the very first version of it looked like. Often it looks like a complete toy. And yet, when we take that change and kind of follow it through its logical conclusion, often it has really unexpected consequences for good. And entrepreneurship is really a unique career. It's one where the fuel that powers our success is making people's lives better. That's the only way that we can succeed and have any kind of sustainable impact. After the TechCrunch bump is over, after the rounds of funding and all the hype, when you strip all that away, it's either a Ponzi scheme or something real. And if it's real, that means there are actual human beings who have voluntarily decided to engage with us and be on the journey with us. And that is actually, we're not getting their time and attention because we're a giant media company and we've had it for years. We don't have that time and attention because we've our ancestors gave us the means of production and they owe us. It's because we had to earn it from scratch. And I think having people pour their energy into that can't help but produce a lot of awesome outcomes.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear about your startup.
Good.
You got 2 weeks to launch it.
I find the idea of entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship a real market opportunity, because so many of those people are isolated within these large companies, and I have years of experience in large companies. So the methodology that you have talks to products, it talks to services. I'm wondering if the same thing couldn't be used for process. In other words, use the process to build process.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, your business process methodologies and all the software associated with that, could you cut that down and therefore cut the waste out? Because the business process methodology business is right. Could the standard, or I should say the startup methodology be used, that process be used to build process?
Not only can it, but it has been used quite successfully. I'll just tell you one example. I'm bound by NDA not to tell you the name of this company, but if I did, you'd be impressed. It's a very cool company, and they decided to give continuous deployment a try. And here's how it happened. There was a random engineer read a blog post about continuous deployment. And they're like, that seems like kind of a cool thing. They took it to their manager, who took it to their manager, who took it, Somehow this idea gets floated all the way up to the executive committee of the company. And, the engineer is called into the meeting to present what he just learned from this blog post, poor guy. And the CEO of the company says, anyone who doesn't think this is a good idea shouldn't work at this company. That's it, like that. He's like, this is obviously a good idea, we're doing it. So next thing you know, this engineer is now in charge of the team that's supposed to lead this corporate transformation to continuous deployment. He's like, but they did it in a really rigorous way. They started out viewing the internal customers, the engineers, as their customers. They did a bunch of customer development to try to understand what kind of services do we have to provide to engineers to get them to switch to this deployment infrastructure. They started out with your classic, what we would call a concierge minimum viable product, where they took I think 2 teams and really worked with them intensively, manually, one at a time, to try to get them onto this new infrastructure. And then basically, I think year 1, all they had accomplished was they got 2 teams onto continuous deployment, 2 little mini teams. But that was considered a huge win. It's like, okay, that's starting to figure out what it's going to require. The next year, they had to do, they were on 15 teams, and the third year, they were in half the teams of the company. And it was they had no mandate to force anybody to do anything. They were providing a service that engineers had to buy by adopting. So they had to provide that utility internally to the company.
So you would say that the minimum, the MVV on that was the team, rather than the process?
Well, they built the minimum amount of tools necessary to enable the new way of working for those first teams. So they were building infrastructure and tools, absolutely. But they understood that their main responsibility was to sell this way of thinking to other people in the company, to make that process change.
All right, thanks.
So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming down here, Eric. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
My question is from the very, very large to the very small. So we're a consultancy, and we are approached by a lot of very early stage companies, and they say there's some of them, along the lines of, we're a lean startup, and we know exactly what our MVP needs to be. Just tell us how much and how long it'll take to build it. What can we politely say to those people?
You can tell them that Eric Ries says they're doing it wrong.
That was all I needed.
Yeah, that's all you need, yeah. You're set. You can have my stamp of approval, tell them they're doing it wrong. I mean, look, this is actually a really hard problem between consultancies and agencies and their clients. And this is something that my friend Jeff Gotthelf talks about, getting out of the deliverables business. And anyone who works in an agency, you got to go read his work on that. He's actually coming out with a book on lean UX, and it's going to be really important, because fundamentally, if you do work for hire in this kind of agency, you get paid for your deliverables. That's what people are buying from you. At least for development shops, you're delivering code to them. Like the design shops have it even worse. They get paid for specifications. That's what they deliver to the client. That's how they get paid. So the only way to fix this problem is to get out of the deliverables business. You have to get into a different business relationship with your client. And unfortunately, the client is the one asking you for the wrong thing. So I mean, it's a very difficult cognitive barrier to get over, which is why I can confidently tell you what to do and be very confident you're probably not going to do it. Because agencies never want to change their business model, because it's very profitable to be in the deliverables business, because you're fundamentally not responsible for what happens. So if you build an awesome deliverable that customers hate, but it's like technically really excellent, you did your job. The only way to get out of that, I think, is to accept joint responsibility for the outcome with your client. And basically say, we will partner with you to develop this, to like get to this business outcome, and pay us for the business outcome, not for the deliverable. And then you and them can get together into an iteration and build, measure, learning loop, and you can be pivoting, and you can do all that stuff along the way. But I mean, doesn't that seem like business model hell? So I get why.
Like they're taking all of the upside potential and they're passing all of the risk on to you. It's sort of a reverse risk arbitrage. And
no. They have to be willing to share the risk and the cost. I mean, and the risk and the reward. That's the only way to make it work. I mean, not to put in a plug for something that I I own equity in, but there's a company called New Context, which is created by Ian McFarland, who's a former Pivotal CTO, and one of the products that they are developing, they call them nano products, which is, basically, think of like what you could do with like 2 engineers in a room in 2 weeks. I mean, it really is simple, like production-ready MVP product. And if you want, you can buy that deliverable style for a certain price. But what we would rather you do is trade equity for cash. So we will take a lower cash compensation in exchange for which we will jointly own the thing that we develop together. And then we own, we've both put time and money at risk, and then we both jointly own the outcome. I think that is going to have to be the model for future development if you want to work in this way. But, this is still very experimental. So
we'll stick to fee for service, but thank you.
I told you would. It's okay. You're in good company.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Oh, yeah? Okay, make it count.
Heads or tails? No. We'll go with you.
Eric, thanks so much for your book. I'd be interested to hear how you would compare 2 titans of the technology industry, Microsoft and Apple, in terms of how they have applied, or how, and especially in terms of missed opportunities, because when I look at Microsoft, I just see so many missed opportunities, and how you compare those 2 companies.
Yeah, this is tricky territory for professional experts such as myself, and I want to explain why. When you are a professional expert, you face only one overriding financial incentive, and that is to say things that sound good. That's it. So whether they're true or not, nobody cares. It's like if it sounds good, the more it sounds good, then the better. And so if you read business books, you will read every book is like, our methodology was followed by Apple and Microsoft and Southwest Airlines and Walmart, because you just want to like posthumously baptize as many people as possible into your religion, then it sounds good. So, I mean, I would love to be like, yep, Apple, Microsoft, totally did Lean Startup. But, the truth is I wasn't there. My only knowledge about Microsoft comes from being a Microsoft intern like 15 years ago, And so I do not have a great grand strategy view of Microsoft. And most of what we know about Apple comes from their PR department. And so I don't believe it. So I don't know is the true answer. Now, if you look at Microsoft, their struggles have been really well documented, and they are clearly suffering from the classic innovator's dilemma, Clay Christensen problem, where they had incredible financial results from these legacy products that allowed them to be just up and to the right no matter what idiocy they did elsewhere in the business. And they never developed a really rigorous methodology for new product introduction, as far as I can tell. So I do believe that's a huge missed opportunity. I do believe that companies like Microsoft can use these techniques to innovate. And I'm in the book I talk about Intuit, which is one company that is trying to develop a rigorous methodology around Lean Startup so as to improve their new product introduction process. But everybody wants to know about Apple because Steve Jobs said he doesn't listen to customers, and this guy's saying to listen to customers. So who's right? What am I gonna be like? Don't listen to Steve Jobs? Like, come on. And this is tricky because, like I said, we don't actually know a lot about the real internal process at Apple. And so it's hard. It's just like it's hard to argue with a saint, with a created mythology. And I've learned the hard way that telling entrepreneurs to give up on their dream of becoming the next Steve Jobs is a mistake. That does not sound good. And I don't want anybody to do that. And so I thought, I would tell you a little bit about the Steve Jobs that I admire, because when we think about Steve Jobs trying to be him, we think a lot about the guy who was on stage launching the iPad. Everyone remembers that moment when everybody said that's the stupidest thing they ever heard, and then 5 seconds later, the president is calling you, being like, "Can I have an iPad?" You're like, that's fun. Okay, that's a huge, an incredible, world-changing product launch. How fun is that? That's not the Steve Jobs I admire. The Steve Jobs I admire is the one who had the courage to launch the Apple I. Anyone here ever actually seen an Apple I in person? Raise show of hands. Oh, wow. Okay, we have some well-educated people in the history of computing. It's an extremely rare device, so rare they don't even have one in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. It was a bucket of parts that barely did anything. And it was sold only to the Homebrew Computer Club. And I want you to think about having the vision of the potential impact of the personal computer and then being willing to build your classic minimum viable product that you sell to a bunch of dirty hippies at the Homebrew Computer Club and sell like 50 of them total, okay? That ability to think that big and act that small, that to me is the Steve Jobs that we should all want to emulate. So that's who I admire. Would he have approved of Lean Startup? I have no idea. I like to think that he would have, but I guess I will never know. Can we squeeze in this guy's last question?
Go for it.
It's because I know it's going to be a great question, right?
Thanks, of course.
Yeah.
You brought up Innovator's Dilemma. I'm surprised all the entrepreneurs I meet that haven't heard of the book.
Insane.
And you also talk about lean manufacturing. Any other works that you suggest people read to understand what it is you're really talking about?
I love books about manufacturing and the kind of classic books of business strategy like Innovator's Dilemma, like The Toyota Way, like Lean Thinking. And those books have influenced me a great deal. I've learned that recommending those books to entrepreneurs is basically a waste of time because they're too busy to think about that stuff, and it requires a real leap of the imagination. Even people who work for me at InView, they would be like, hey, how does this continuous deployment thing work? And I'd be like, let me explain how die stamping in a manufacturing plant works. And they'd be like, what's up? WTF, what does that have to do with me? I work in software. Why are we talking about die stamping? And of course, a dirty secret, I've never been in an automobile plant in my life. I wouldn't know a die stamping machine from a paper cutter. But the theory of batch size and iteration and the work that has been done, I think is really critical. So, I think the classics of business strategy that are essential for entrepreneurs, Innovator's Dilemma has to be on that list. Crossing the Chasm has to be on that list. And then all of the lean books I think are really key. I actually just did a podcast for the guy who writes the Lean blog about a book called Toyota Production System, the original book by a man named Taichi Ono from Japan. And it's his 100th, it would have been his 100th birthday just the other day. And so we were reflecting on the impact that he has had on the world, which we owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. And maybe I'll close with a story because I feel like this is very relevant to things we've been talking about tonight. If you read this book in its English translation, it is super, super annoying. You will be like, what? You buy this book, it's called Beyond Mass Production, Toyota Production System. It's the book on manufacturing. So you're expecting a step-by-step guide to how to set up a manufacturing plant. And the whole book is practically about all this Zen mumbo-jumbo, about respect for people, all these Toyota Production System sayings every defect is a treasure. It used to drive me crazy. Every defect is a treasure. Defect's horrible. What are you talking about? And all this philosophical stuff. And the first time I read the book, I was just like, what is this Zen crap? Get me a book about manufacturing. But actually, the more I have come to understand lean thinking, the more valuable that philosophical stuff has become. And the more I realize that what this is about is more than just a business process to make more money. It is actually a more humane way of working that actually honors the creativity in all of us. And I told you I was a little woo-woo because I'm from San Francisco. And I think a lot about what happened when the American automobile executives, in the 80s and 90s, went over to Japan to figure out what this whole Japanese thing was about. Remember that was that whole phase when, American media was all about how Japan was trying to kill us and it was this horrible thing and American manufacturing was losing its edge. So that whole period was characterized by Toyota saying, listen, we are willing to open up our factories and plants to anybody who wants to come look. They had this belief, a very far-sighted belief, that if they made their competitors better, that would actually be better for the whole industry. So they were willing to tell anybody the secrets of Toyota Production System who wanted to know. So I imagine these meetings between these American automobile executives. They go over to Japan and they meet with the Taichi Onos of the world and they're like, okay, tell us the secret. And he's like, let me tell you about respect for people and every defect is a treasure. You can just see these American, oh my God, what is this Zen, mumbo jumbo, woo woo, whatever. Okay, yeah, respect for people, whatever. Show me the factory. Okay, and they take them on a factory tour, and even in the 80s, those Japanese factories were like gleaming temples of robotics and automation and really advanced stuff. And I know exactly what happened. The American automobile sector are like, I got it. Robots. That's not Zen crap. Robots are the future. And if you look at what happened in the 80s and 90s, the General Motors and Fords, they spent billions and billions of dollars on robots accomplishing absolutely nothing. Because it is not the robots that made Toyota Production System amazing. It is every defect is a treasure. It is the respect for people. It is the philosophy of a better way of work. Now, you're laughing at those. It's easy to make fun of American automobile executives. I mean, come on, it's shooting fish in a barrel. But how many people in this room have or are going to, as soon as we end this event, come up to me and say, hey, can I buy Lean Startup in a box? It's the most common question I get. It's like, can you sell me software, tools, any kind of snake oil to make this easy for me? And everybody wants robots. So I'd like to close on that because it's like, look, this is like, don't let this become another religion where we get excited about robots. That's not going to make any impact on anybody. Don't just copy the things that I said because I said they were great. If we're going to be successful in changing the way work is done, we all have to work together to understand, refine, and evolve a philosophy of work that is fundamentally compatible with the economy of the 21st century, one that is characterized by incredibly rapid change and crazy, crazy uncertainty. The methods of our grandparents are not going to cut it. So we have to be the ones to take this seriously and figure out what works. And like I said, what we know now is the tip of the iceberg. But we're going to need a lot more than robots to get it done. We're going to need the creativity and ingenuity of every one of you. So thank you very, very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks, Eric, for coming down and spending some time with us. We've got about another half an hour if you guys want to hang out in the lobby, externalize all this, talk about it. And we're going to be releasing a video, too, so if you know someone that could make it tonight, we'll tweet it out and send out to our mailing list on Lean LA. Thanks.